The House That Awakened Henry Creel. It started with a quiet house at the end of a tree-lined street, the kind of place that looks peaceful until you listen closely to what the walls remember. The Creel family moved to Hawkins in 1959, hoping for a second chance, carrying more optimism than caution. Victor believed the Victorian home on Morehead Street would give Virginia and their children a better life, but Henry arrived already sensing currents no one else noticed. He felt the house long before he understood it, a pressure in the air that made him withdraw while everyone else unpacked boxes under warm yellow light. Henry's sensitivity deepened into something far more dangerous. Objects shifted when his emotions flared. Thoughts from people nearby brushed against his mind like whispers through a cracked door. Small distortions in reality echoed his presence, growing stronger as he learned to hide them. To his family, the distance in his eyes looked like ordinary adolescence, but Henry was quietly forming a belief that humanity was fundamentally flawed. The weight of other people's emotions pressed on him constantly, shaping a worldview built on isolation rather than connection. Reddit fans often point out how early the signs were hiding in plain sight. Then came the night when everything the Creels believed about their new beginning fractured beyond repair. The night the Creel family fell apart. The night everything unraveled inside the Creel house felt wrong, from the moment the lights began to flicker. What happened to Virginia and Alice could not be explained by anything the town understood. Their bodies were left in states that defied logic, as if something unseen had taken hold of them and twisted reality around their final moments. Victor was found on the floor in shock, barely responsive, which made him the simplest answer for a community desperate to assign blame. He was declared guilty and sent to a psychiatric hospital where he spent the rest of his life insisting that an unseen force had torn his family apart. Hawkins wrote it off as the frantic story of a man refusing responsibility, but fans have long pointed out that Victor was telling the truth. There was something in that house, and its name was Henry Creel. Henry had turned on his mother when she tried to send him to doctors who wanted to study his abilities, and he turned on his sister because she embodied everything he believed humanity pretended to be. To Henry, families were cages where people performed affection they did not feel, and the murders became the first expression of a worldview built on power rather than connection. He framed his father because Victor was convenient, and because Henry believed the world rewarded those who shaped the narrative first. His only mistake was pushing himself to the point of collapse, leaving him unconscious long enough for authorities to arrive before he could manipulate the scene more carefully. Reddit noticed years later that this moment was the first hint of what Henry would eventually become. What happened next shifted the trajectory of the entire series. The day Brenner discovered his greatest weapon. Dr. Martin Brenner was already conducting secret experiments in the depths of Hawkins' lab, searching for children whose minds could be shaped into weapons under the cover of scientific research. When news of the Creel murders and Victor's claim about a demon reached him, Brenner paid attention in a way no one else did. He visited the house and found Henry unconscious but alive, the air around him still buzzing with psychic static. In that instant, Brenner recognized what he had stumbled onto. Henry was proof that extraordinary abilities could appear naturally without the lab's harsh enhancement methods. Brenner arranged for Henry to be declared dead on paper while quietly transporting him into the facility. There, the boy became one, the first successful subject in a program that would eventually produce 17 numbered children. Reddit later pointed out how quickly Brenner moved, as if he had been waiting for someone like Henry. Henry spent years trapped inside the lab, wearing a device around his neck that muted his powers and reduced him to something manageable. Brenner observed him through glass walls, studying every reaction with clinical interest. The doctor wanted to understand Henry's abilities so he could recreate them in others, which meant constant testing that pushed Henry to the edge without letting him fight back. Brenner spoke to him with a blend of fascination and cold control, calling himself Henry's papa while withholding any sense of freedom or identity. It was a relationship built on manipulation disguised as affection. Meanwhile, Brenner was quietly building something inside the lab that would eventually lead to his own downfall. By the way, if you're a Stranger Things fan, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe because it helps more than you know. Brenner claims Henry Creel. Brenner's program widened quietly, pulling in children under the comforting label of special education, only to subject them to conditions designed to push their minds past natural limits. The Rainbow Room looked cheerful at first glance, its bright murals glowing under warm lights. But it was a controlled environment where children competed for Brenner's approval, while being shaped into something he could use. Henry watched from his isolated cell, studying the room through narrow windows as Brenner tested methods that had never fully worked on him. It created a new generation of psychic children who were younger, more impressionable, and far easier for Brenner to mold than the boy who still remembered life before the lab. Reddit fans later pointed out how the Rainbow Room's bright colors made the setting even more unsettling once the truth was revealed. One of those children was 11, born Jane Ives. Taken from Terry Ives long before she understood what family meant, to Brenner, she represented a breakthrough. Her abilities echoed Henry's natural power, proving that the lab had finally learned to replicate what it found in the Creel house. Henry noticed her quickly. She was quiet, observant, carrying the same bruised innocence he had once possessed. In her, he saw a kindred spirit shaped by the same man who had stolen years of his life. Henry began planning an escape that required a partner, someone whose abilities were still strong enough to bypass the limits placed on him. He offered 11 gentleness she had never felt from Brenner, speaking to her in ways that made her feel seen, slowly convincing her they were both prisoners who deserved freedom. Then came the day that shifted the course of the entire series, a moment whose full meaning would not become clear until years later. September 8th, 1979, the day one became Vecna and the Upside Down gained its master. Henry convinced 11 to remove the device around his neck by telling her it would help him protect the other children, presenting himself as a friend trapped under Brenner's control. The moment the collar came off, the air in the Rainbow Room shifted. Henry's expression changed, the lights flickered, and 11 realized too late that she had released someone far more dangerous than she understood. Fans often say this is the exact moment the tone of the series quietly transformed. What followed was chaos that left the Rainbow Room in ruins. Henry unleashed his abilities in a way the children had never witnessed, turning the once colorful space into a scene filled with overturned furniture, shattered glass, and alarms blaring through the corridors. The numbered children who had spent years enduring Brenner's experiments were overwhelmed instantly, unable to defend themselves against a force that saw them as obstacles rather than allies. Henry wanted 11 to stand beside him, to destroy the lab and reshape the world according to the philosophy he had carried since the Creel house. But 11 refused. She pushed back with every ounce of power she had, even though she was younger, smaller, and far less trained. The psychic clash filled the Rainbow Room with surging energy, lights strobing as the walls shook from the force of their abilities colliding. In a moment of instinct and fear, 11 did something no one expected. She opened a tearing flash of light in the air, a doorway to somewhere unknown, and sent Henry hurtling through it before the portal sealed shut. When Brenner returned, the lab was in pieces, the program shattered, and 11 stood alone, surrounded by devastation she could not explain. But Henry was not gone. In the world on the other side of that rift, he transformed into something even darker, the birth of Vecna. When Henry fell into that unknown dimension, he landed in a world lit by red flashes and drifting particles that moved like dust. Suspended in a beam of light, there were no landmarks, no sky, no ground that felt familiar. He was exhausted and weakened from his fight with 11, but his mind stayed sharp, focused, and furious. The dimension reacted to him almost immediately, responding to his presence the way a tuning fork vibrates when struck. Its strange properties recognized something in his abilities, and over time they began reshaping him. His physical form changed as the environment absorbed him, and his humanity faded until he emerged as a figure fans would later call Vecna. Borrowing a name from Dungeons & Dragons while the show kept his identity hidden, Henry did not simply survive in the Upside Down. He claimed it. The dimension bent around his will as he spent years shaping its empty landscape into a dark reflection of Hawkins, a place where he could plan quietly and wait for a way back. He encountered the swirling mass fans know as the Mind Flayer, or perhaps he molded it from the particles drifting through the void, forming it into a creature that amplified his reach. The beings that would later terrorize Hawkins, including the Demogorgons, moved under his influence, serving as tools designed to open cracks between worlds. Every creation, every creature, every shift in that realm was part of his long preparation to escape the prison 11 had sent him to in 1979. And then, after years of waiting, the moment arrived. A door opened, and Henry felt the first path back to the world he had never stopped watching. November 6th, 1983. Will Byers vanished because Vecna was ready to come home. When 11 reached out to the Demogorgon during one of Brenner's tests, she unknowingly reopened the same gateway she had sealed years earlier while fighting 1. The moment that connection formed, something on the other side responded. Vecna felt the breach immediately. He sent creatures toward the opening, testing its strength and searching for someone who could anchor a more permanent passage between the two worlds. Reddit noticed how quickly the energy shifts in that scene give away what is coming. The Demogorgon encountered Will Byers on a quiet road as he pedaled home from a D&D session, the flashlight on his bike trembling in the night air. Will's fear reminded Vecna of a vulnerability he had exploited long ago, and the creature pulled the boy through the gateway before anyone knew he was missing. Will survived in the Upside Down for a week, because Vecna was not ready to harm him. Instead, he watched Will closely, studying how a human mind reacted to prolonged exposure to that environment. To Vecna, Will became the first true experiment in understanding how consciousness could be shaped from a distance. That week changed Will permanently. It created a link between him and the Upside Down that did not disappear even after he returned home. Vecna recognized that bond as an opportunity and used it repeatedly in the years that followed. When the Mind Flayer took hold of Will in Season 2, the attack was not random. It was Vecna using the existing connection to test whether he could influence a human mind through layers of reality. Joyce and Hopper's determination broke that hold, teaching Vecna how powerful human bonds could be when people refused to give up on each other. Then came the revelation that rewrote everything fans thought they understood about the mythology of the show. Season 4 reveals Vecna's master plan. Vecna's rise as the true mastermind pulled every supernatural thread from 4 seasons into one chilling design. He was the mind guiding the Mind Flayer, the force behind every possession, every disturbance, and every moment the Upside Down pressed against the fabric of Hawkins. His targets in Season 4 were not random. He focused on teenagers carrying emotional wounds, because he understood from experience how unresolved pain could weaken mental defenses. Through those vulnerabilities, he could slip into their thoughts, twist their fears, and gain the influence he needed to move his plan forward. Each victim opened another tier between the worlds, and 4 tiers created a massive rupture that began merging Hawkins with the dimension he controlled. Max's collapse during his curse was meant to trigger the final break, but 11 reached her from across the country and pulled her back, interrupting the ritual. The intervention saved Max physically, but left her mind stranded somewhere between realities, unable to return fully. Meanwhile, Vecna recovered from the injuries he suffered during the confrontation with Nancy, Steve, and Robin. The tiers he created remained in place, spreading slowly through Hawkins, a reminder that his defeat had only delayed him rather than stopped him. And now, in Season 5, Vecna returns with a refined strategy, having studied every mistake he made the first time. Vecna's new strategy in Season 5. Henry has always viewed children as the center of his strategy because he believes their minds are easier to influence than those of adults who have built up years of emotional defenses. His new plan involves taking groups of kids around the same age the party was when everything began, marking them with his influence while keeping them trapped in his realm. Instead of using them as immediate sacrifices, he treats each child as a potential gateway he can activate at the same time, which would create far more breaches than the town has ever faced. The dimensional strain would spread so widely that no response from Hawkins, the government, or anyone else could stop the merger before it becomes permanent. To reach them, Henry appears under the gentle name Mr. What's-It, borrowing from A Wrinkle in Time because he knows how to present himself as harmless and familiar. Holly Wheeler becomes one of his main targets, even though she is younger than the people he usually focuses on. Some fans think the choice is tactical, while others see it as emotional payback against the group that has stopped him more than once. The children he gathers become the foundation of a final confrontation, where the party will have to find them and pull them out of his influence before he activates every gateway at once and floods their world with the decay of the Upside Down. So, do any parts of Vecna's worldview hold even a sliver of truth beneath all the destruction he wants to unleash? Share your thoughts below.